The morning sun peeked through the windows of Memorial Hospital as Sarah Jenkins hurried down the busy hallway. Her white nurse's shoes squeaked against the clean floor as she made her way to start another 12-hour shift. At 32 years old, Sarah had worked at the hospital for 7 years, and she loved every minute of it. Her dark skin glowed with natural beauty, and her kind brown eyes always made patients feel at ease. "Sarah, we need you in room 415, called out Nancy, the head nurse, as she passed by. "New patient came in last night. He needs help with his morning routine." Sarah nodded and changed direction, heading to the 4th floor. She checked her watch, 7:15 a.m. The morning shift had just begun, and she already felt the familiar excitement of meeting new patients. That was her favorite part of nursing. Every day brought new people with new stories. When she walked into room 415, she found a man sitting in a wheelchair by the window. He was looking outside, watching the city wake up. The morning light touched his face, showing his strong jawline and gentle features. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with neat brown hair and glasses that made him look professional even in a hospital gown. "Good morning," Sarah said warmly, checking the chart at the foot of his bed. "I'm Sarah, and I'll be your nurse today. You must be Michael Thompson." The man turned his wheelchair around, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat when she saw his smile. It wasn't just a normal smile. It lit up his whole face and reached all the way to his bright blue eyes. "That's me," he replied cheerfully, "though I wish we were meeting somewhere more exciting than a hospital room." Sarah couldn't help but laugh. It was rare to find patients in such good spirits so early in the morning. As she read through his chart, she learned that Michael had been in a car accident 3 years ago that left him with a spinal injury. He was here for some routine tests and monitoring. "Well, Mr. Thompson," she began, but he quickly cut her off. "Please call me Michael. Mr. Thompson makes me sound like my father." As Sarah helped Michael with his morning routine, they fell into easy conversation. She discovered he was a software engineer who worked from home, creating programs for big companies. Despite being in a wheelchair, he spoke about his work with such passion that Sarah found herself drawn into his stories about coding and problem solving. "Most people's eyes glaze over when I talk about programming." Michael laughed as Sarah helped him back into his wheelchair after finishing his morning exercises. "But you actually seem interested." "Because you make it interesting," Sarah replied honestly. "It's not just about computers to you. It's about solving puzzles and helping people make their work easier." Michael looked at her with surprise and appreciation. "You know, that's exactly it. Most people just see the wheelchair first and don't bother to look past it." Sarah felt a strange flutter in her stomach when their eyes met. There was something special about Michael, something that had nothing to do with his disability. He was intelligent, funny, and saw the world in a unique way. Throughout the morning, Sarah found herself coming back to room 415 more often than necessary. Each time, Michael had a new story to tell or a clever joke to share. He asked about her life too, showing genuine interest in her stories about growing up in Chicago with her 3 sisters and moving to this city to pursue her nursing career. By lunchtime, Sarah realized she had spent more time in Michael's room than with any other patient. She should have felt guilty about it, but somehow, it felt right. There was something about the way he listened, really listened, when she spoke. And the way his face lit up when she entered the room made her feel special in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. As she left his room that afternoon, Sarah felt different. She couldn't explain it, but something had changed. It was as if the universe had pushed her into room 415 for a reason. Little did she know that this ordinary Tuesday morning was the beginning of an extraordinary love story, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, life, and what really matters in a relationship. 2 weeks after meeting Michael at the hospital, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time she passed room 415, now occupied by a different patient, she remembered his warm smile and clever jokes. She was surprised when she got a friend request from him on Facebook, and even more surprised at how happy it made her feel. Their first real conversation outside the hospital happened through text messages. Michael asked if she would like to have coffee with him at the small cafe across from the hospital. Sarah said yes without hesitating, even though her hands shook a little as she typed the response. When Saturday came, Sarah spent extra time getting ready. She chose a pretty yellow sundress that complemented her dark skin and arranged her braids perfectly. As she walked to the cafe, her stomach was full of butterflies. Michael was already there when she arrived, sitting at an accessible table near the window. He had traded his hospital gown for a crisp blue shirt that brought out his eyes. When he saw her, his whole face lit up with that special smile she remembered. "You look beautiful," he said, and Sarah could tell he really meant it. Their coffee date turned into 3 hours of non-stop talking. Sarah learned about Michael's life before the accident, how he used to love hiking and rock climbing. But instead of being bitter about what he had lost, he talked about how the accident had taught him to see life differently. "Sometimes the best gifts come in unexpected packages," he said, stirring his second cup of coffee. "If I hadn't had the accident, I might have stayed the same shallow person I was before." But not everyone was as understanding about their growing friendship. When Sarah told her best friend Lisa about Michael, the response wasn't what she expected. "A guy in a wheelchair?" Lisa asked, frowning. "Sarah, you're such a vibrant person. Don't you want someone who can dance with you? Go hiking? Have a normal life?" Sarah felt her face get hot with anger. "What's normal, Lisa? Someone who can walk, but doesn't know how to treat people right." The criticism didn't stop there. When Sarah's sister Tamika saw a picture of Michael and Sarah together on Facebook, she called immediately. "He seems nice," Tamika said carefully, "but have you thought about how hard it will be? And what about Mom and Dad? They'd already worry about you dating a white man, and now?" "Now what?" Sarah challenged. "Now he's in a wheelchair, so that makes it worse." But for every person who doubted their relationship, there were others who supported them. Nancy, the head nurse who had first sent Sarah to Michael's room, saw them at the cafe one day and came over to say hello. "You two look so happy together," she said, smiling warmly. "It's beautiful to see." Michael had his own battles to fight. Some of his friends couldn't understand why a successful software engineer would settle for a nurse, especially a black woman. Their racist comments made Michael so angry that he stopped inviting them to his house. Their loss, he told Sarah one evening as they shared a pizza at his place. They're missing out on knowing an amazing person because they're stuck in the past. Despite all the obstacles, Sarah and Michael's connection grew stronger. They found joy in simple things, watching movies together, sharing meals, talking about their dreams. Michael showed Sarah his world of computer programming, and she was fascinated by how he could create entire systems with just lines of code. Sarah introduced Michael to her favorite soul food recipes, teaching him how to make her grandmother's famous mac and cheese. Even from his wheelchair, he insisted on helping, making them laugh when he accidentally spilled flour all over himself. One evening, as they sat in Michael's backyard watching the sunset, Sarah realized something important. She wasn't falling in love with a disabled man, or a white man, or any label that others tried to put on Michael. She was falling in love with a person who made her laugh, who challenged her mind, who saw her for exactly who she was. The world might not understand their love story, but Sarah and Michael were writing it their own way. And as the sky turned pink and orange above them, Sarah knew that some stories are worth fighting for, no matter what anyone else might say. 3 months into their relationship, Sarah noticed a change in Michael. He became quieter during their evening video calls, and sometimes he would cancel their weekend plans at the last minute. At first, she thought he might be busy with work, but her nurse's instinct told her something deeper was wrong. One rainy Sunday afternoon, Sarah drove to Michael's house with his favorite chocolate chip cookies that she had baked. When he opened the door, she could see the surprise and something else in his eyes. Worry. "Sarah, you didn't have to come," he said softly, backing his wheelchair up to let her in. The house was unusually messy, with empty coffee cups on the coffee table and his laptop surrounded by scattered papers. Michael had always been very organized, so this was another sign that something wasn't right. "I wanted to see you," Sarah said, setting the cookies down. "And I want you to tell me what's been bothering you." Michael wheeled himself to the window, looking out at the rain. His shoulders were tense, and Sarah waited patiently, knowing he needed time to find the right words. "I saw you yesterday," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "At the park near your house. You were jogging, looking so free and happy." Sarah remembered her morning jog, but she didn't understand why this would upset him. "And all I could think was, I can never do that with you," Michael continued, his voice breaking a little. "I can never run beside you, or dance with you at a wedding, or even walk with you on the beach. You deserve someone whole, Sarah. Someone who can give you a normal life." Sarah felt her heart squeeze tight in her chest. She walked over to Michael and knelt down beside his wheelchair, taking his hand in hers. "Look at me," she said firmly. Michael slowly turned to face her, and she could see tears in his eyes. "Do I look unhappy to you?" "No, but—" "No buts," Sarah interrupted. "You want to know what I was thinking about during that jog yesterday? I was thinking about how excited I was to try that new Italian restaurant with you. I was thinking about how you make me laugh even on my worst days. I was thinking about how smart and kind and wonderful you are." Michael tried to pull his hand away, but Sarah held on tight. "I don't want a normal life, Michael. I want a life with you. And yes, that life might look different from what others consider normal, but who cares? When I'm with you, I feel more alive than I've ever felt." "What about the future?" Michael asked, his voice still uncertain. "What about all the things you might have to give up?" Sarah stood up and walked to her purse. She pulled out her phone and showed Michael her photo gallery. There were dozens of pictures of them together, laughing at the cafe, having picnics in the park, cooking in his kitchen, watching movies on his couch. "This is our future," she said, scrolling through the photos. "It's in every smile, every moment we share. You're not half a person, Michael. You're the whole person I want to be with." Michael stared at the photos, and Sarah could see the emotions playing across his face. Finally, he looked up at her with those bright blue eyes she'd fallen in love with. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said softly. Sarah smiled and kissed him gently. "You were just yourself. That's all you ever need to be." That evening, they ordered pizza and watched old movies together. The rain continued outside, but inside, something had changed. Michael's smile came more easily, and he held Sarah's hand like he never wanted to let go. As Sarah drove home later that night, she thought about their conversation. Some people might see their relationship as a challenge, but to her, it was simple. Love wasn't about what a person couldn't do, it was about who they were in their heart. And Michael's heart was the most beautiful thing she had ever known. 6 months into their relationship, Michael had a secret. His best friend Tom visited him every evening after Sarah's nursing shifts, helping him prepare for something special. Even on days when Michael felt tired or discouraged, Tom pushed him to keep going with their plan. "She's going to love it, man," Tom would say, adjusting the fairy lights they had hung around Michael's living room. "Sarah's not like other people. She sees the real you." Michael had spent weeks practicing with the ring box, making sure he could open it smoothly from his wheelchair. The ring inside was beautiful, a simple diamond surrounded by small sapphires that reminded him of the blue dress Sarah wore on their first real date. On a quiet Friday evening, Sarah came over after her shift, expecting their usual movie night. When she opened the door using her key, Michael had given it to her last month. She stopped in surprise. The living room was transformed. Hundreds of tiny lights twinkled from the ceiling and walls, making the room glow like starlight. Her favorite flowers, yellow roses, were everywhere, their sweet smell filling the air. Soft music played in the background, the same song that had been playing at the cafe when they first had coffee together. "Michael," she called out, her heart beating faster. He wheeled himself out from the kitchen, wearing a new dark blue suit that made him look so handsome Sarah's breath caught in her throat. In his lap was a covered silver dinner tray. "Welcome home," he said softly, his eyes shining with love and nervousness. Sarah walked closer, noticing the table was set beautifully with her favorite pasta from the Italian restaurant they loved. There were candles everywhere, their flames dancing and making shadows on the walls. "What's all this?" she asked, though her heart already knew. She could feel the magic in the air. Michael wheeled himself to her and held out the silver tray. "Before dinner, I have something to show you." With shaking hands, Sarah lifted the cover. Inside was a photo album, and on top of it was a small note that said, "Our Story." As she opened the album, tears filled her eyes. The first photo was from the hospital. Someone had captured the moment she first walked into room 415. Page after page showed their journey together, their coffee dates, park visits, movie nights, and family dinners. There were pictures she had never seen before, moments someone had captured without her knowing. The last page had only one photo, taken yesterday. It showed Michael in his wheelchair, holding the ring box, with the words, "Will you turn the page?" Sarah's hands trembled as she turned to the final page. There, in Michael's neat handwriting, were the words, Sarah Jenkins, will you marry me? She looked up to find Michael holding out the ring box, which he opened with the smooth motion he had practiced so many times. I can't get down on one knee, he said, his voice full of emotion, but my heart kneels before you every day. You came into my life when I thought my story was over, and you showed me it was just beginning. Will you marry me? Sarah couldn't speak for a moment. Tears ran down her cheeks as she looked at the man she loved, this wonderful, strong, beautiful soul who had changed her life in so many ways. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, yes, yes. She knelt down beside his wheelchair as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, just like they fit perfectly together. When she looked up at him, his eyes were wet with tears too. I love you, Michael said, cupping her face with his hand. Every day, I'll spend my life proving that your faith in me was worth it. Sarah leaned in and kissed him, not caring about her tears or his, just feeling the pure joy of this moment. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful colors, as if nature itself was celebrating their love. Later that night, as they shared the dinner Michael had arranged, with lots of help from Tom, Sarah couldn't stop looking at her ring and at the wonderful man who had given it to her. She knew some people might not understand their love story, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that they had found each other, and their story was just beginning. Planning a wedding wasn't easy, but planning a fully accessible wedding brought extra challenges. Sarah and Michael sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by brochures and laptop screens showing different venues. It had been 2 months since the proposal, and they wanted to get married in the spring, just 6 months away. This one looks perfect, Sarah said, pointing to a beautiful garden venue. Her engagement ring sparkled in the morning light as she reached for her coffee cup. Michael wheeled closer to look at the pictures. It's beautiful, but what about the paths? They need to be wide enough for the wheelchair. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find her mother, Patricia, standing there with a big smile and several wedding magazines in her arms. I hope you don't mind me stopping by, Patricia said, walking in and setting down her magazines. I've been thinking about the wedding all week. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. When she first told her parents about Michael, her mother had been worried and distant. But after spending time with him, Patricia had seen what Sarah saw, a kind, loving man who made her daughter incredibly happy. Actually, Mom, we could use your help, Sarah said. We're looking at venues. Patricia pulled up a chair and jumped right in. She asked smart questions that Sarah and Michael hadn't even thought about, like whether the bathrooms were accessible and if there was enough parking for elderly relatives. While they were discussing locations, Michael's phone buzzed. It was a message from his physical therapist, Dr. Roberts. They had been working on something special, but Michael hadn't told Sarah about it yet. He quietly replied to the message while Sarah and her mother talked about flowers. What about the chapel near the lake? Patricia suggested. They just renovated it last year. They looked up the chapel online, and it seemed perfect. It had smooth, wide paths, ramps everywhere, and even an elevator to the reception hall. Plus, it was beautiful, with large windows that looked out over the water. This could be it, Michael said, smiling at Sarah. His eyes held a secret that made her curious, but she didn't ask. She was learning that sometimes Michael's surprises were worth waiting for. Later that week, they visited the chapel. The wedding coordinator, Jenny, showed them around with enthusiasm. She didn't treat Michael any differently because of his wheelchair, which both Sarah and Michael appreciated. We can set up the ceremony so that the aisle is extra wide, Jenny explained. And look, the altar area is completely flat. No steps to worry about. As they toured the venue, Sarah noticed Michael taking notes on his phone. He was paying special attention to the measurements of different spaces and the layout of the rooms. When she asked him about it, he just smiled and said, "Just want everything to be perfect." That evening, Sarah's sisters came over to help with more planning. Tamika and Lisa had also come around, seeing how happy Sarah and Michael were together. They sat in Michael's living room, looking at dress designs and color schemes. I think navy blue would look beautiful, Tamika suggested. It would look great with Michael's eyes and go perfectly with spring flowers. While the sisters discussed colors, Michael excused himself to make a phone call. In the kitchen, he spoke quietly with Dr. Roberts about their special project. The physical therapy was hard work, but Michael was determined. He wanted to give Sarah a wedding gift she would never forget. Back in the living room, Patricia was showing Sarah her own wedding album. "Your father and I had such a small wedding," she said. "But it was perfect because we were in love. That's what matters most." Sarah looked through the old photos, imagining her own wedding day. She glanced at Michael as he wheeled back into the room, and her heart felt so full of love it could burst. "Spring isn't too far away," Lisa said, noticing Sarah's dreamy expression. "No," Sarah replied, reaching for Michael's hand. "But some things are worth waiting for." As the evening went on, more plans came together. They chose their colors, picked a date, and started a guest list. But the most beautiful thing wasn't in any of the planning. It was in the way Sarah and Michael looked at each other, both knowing that whether their wedding was simple or fancy didn't matter. What mattered was that they would be together, starting their own beautiful chapter in life. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect spring weather. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the bridal suite where Sarah sat, watching her mother adjust her veil. The white dress they had chosen fit perfectly, flowing around her in soft waves that would look beautiful next to Michael's wheelchair. "You look like an angel," Patricia said, stepping back to admire her daughter. Tears shone in her eyes as she pinned a small blue flower into Sarah's carefully styled hair. Something blue, for good luck. Sarah's sisters buzzed around the room, helping with last-minute details. Tamika was fixing her makeup, while Lisa arranged the bouquet of white and navy blue flowers. The nervous energy in the room was mixed with excitement and joy. "Did you see how many people came?" Lisa asked, peeking out the window. "The parking lot is full." Indeed, the chapel was filling up with guests. Despite the doubts some people had expressed about their relationship, almost everyone they had invited came to celebrate their love. Even some of Michael's old friends who had initially questioned their relationship had asked to come, wanting to show their support. In another room of the chapel, Michael sat with Tom, who was helping him get ready. Michael wore a handsome black suit with a navy blue tie that matched the wedding colors. His wheelchair had been polished until it shone, with a small boutonniere attached to one side. "How are you feeling?" Tom asked, adjusting Michael's tie. "Nervous," Michael admitted. "But ready. Is everything set for later?" Tom nodded with a knowing smile. "Dr. Roberts is here. Everything's ready exactly as we planned." The guests took their seats in the chapel, admiring the beautiful decorations. Navy blue ribbons and white flowers lined the extra-wide aisle, and sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, creating colorful patterns on the floor. Michael wheeled himself to the altar area, his heart pounding with both nervousness and excitement. He positioned himself carefully, remembering all the measurements and practice sessions with Dr. Roberts. The guests smiled warmly at him, and he could hear some of them commenting on how handsome he looked. The music began to play, not the traditional wedding march, but the same song that had been playing when they first met at the cafe. The doors opened, and Sarah appeared with her father beside her. Michael felt his breath catch in his throat. Sarah was more beautiful than he had ever seen her, her dark skin glowing against the white dress, her smile brighter than any star. As she walked down the aisle, their eyes met, and everything else seemed to fade away. When she reached the altar, Sarah's father kissed her cheek and placed her hand in Michael's. The priest smiled at them both and began the ceremony. "Love," the priest said, "knows no boundaries. It doesn't see differences in ability or color. It sees only the heart, and these two hearts have found their perfect match in each other." Sarah and Michael had written their own vows. Michael went first, his voice strong and clear. "Sarah, you saw me when others looked away. You loved me not in spite of who I am, but because of who I am. I promise to spend every day showing you that love can overcome any obstacle." Sarah wiped happy tears from her eyes before speaking her vows. "Michael, you taught me that love isn't about what a person can or can't do. It's about who they are in their soul. You make me laugh, you make me think, you make me a better person. I promise to be by your side, loving you more each day." They exchanged rings, a simple gold band for Michael, and one that matched Sarah's engagement ring. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the chapel erupted in applause and cheers. Michael pulled Sarah down gently for their first kiss as a married couple. In that moment, they weren't a black woman and a disabled man. They were simply two people deeply in love, starting their life together. As they faced their guests, Sarah saw nothing but joy and acceptance in the faces looking back at them. But what she didn't know was that the biggest surprise of the day was still to come. waiting for them at the chapel's exit doors. After the ceremony, everyone gathered in the reception hall for celebrations. Sarah and Michael shared their first dance, Sarah moving gracefully while Michael spun his wheelchair in perfect time to the music, making everyone smile at how beautifully they moved together. As the evening went on, Sarah noticed Michael having quiet conversations with Tom and Dr. Roberts. She was curious but too busy greeting guests and enjoying the party to think much about it. The reception was everything they had dreamed of, full of love, laughter, and joy. Around sunset, Tom stood up and clinked his glass for attention. "Everyone," he announced, his voice carrying across the room, "Michael and Sarah have a special moment planned at the chapel's exit doors. Would you all please gather there?" Sarah looked at Michael with surprise. "What's going on?" Michael squeezed her hand and smiled mysteriously. "Just trust me, my love." The guests moved to the chapel's main exit, forming a half circle around the doors. Sarah noticed that Tom and Dr. Roberts had disappeared with Michael for a moment. Her mother came to stand beside her, holding her hand with tears already forming in her eyes. "Mom, do you know what's happening?" Sarah asked. Patricia just smiled and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Wait and see, sweetheart." A few minutes later, Tom appeared at the door. "Sarah," he called, "could you come stand right here?" He pointed to a spot near the center of the semicircle of guests. Sarah's heart was beating fast as she walked to the spot. The setting sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over everything. The guests were whispering excitedly, and she could feel the anticipation in the air. Then Michael appeared in the doorway, still in his wheelchair. Dr. Roberts stood beside him, and Sarah noticed something different. Michael was wearing what looked like special braces on his legs. "Sarah," Michael said, his voice full of emotion, "for the past 6 months, I've been keeping a secret from you." He pressed a button on his wheelchair, and the side slowly opened up, revealing the full leg braces. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was about to happen. "Every morning before work, and every evening after you left, I've been working with Dr. Roberts," Michael continued. "I wanted to give you something special, something that seemed impossible." Slowly, with Dr. Roberts standing ready beside him, Michael gripped the handles of his wheelchair. The room was completely silent as he began to push himself up. Sarah watched, tears streaming down her face as her husband, the man everyone said would never walk, slowly rose to his feet. The braces whirred softly as they supported his legs. Michael stood tall, though Sarah could see the effort it took in his face. Then, with intense concentration, he took one step forward. The guests gasped. Sarah couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as she watched Michael take another step, and then another. Dr. Roberts walked beside him, ready to help if needed, but Michael was doing this on his own. 3 steps, that's what he had trained for. 3 steps toward his bride. When he reached her, Michael pulled something from his pocket, a small photo album. "This," he said softly, his voice shaking with emotion, "is every day of training, every moment of work, every time I wanted to give up but thought of you and kept going." Sarah opened the album with trembling hands. Inside were photos of Michael's physical therapy sessions, his struggles and triumphs, the days of pain, and the moments of progress. The final photo was of him standing in the braces for the first time, with the words, "For Sarah," written beneath it. "I may not be able to walk far," Michael said, still standing before her, "and I'll still need my wheelchair. But I wanted to show you that with you by my side, nothing is impossible." Sarah threw her arms around him, crying and laughing at the same time. The guests burst into applause, many of them crying too. Patricia was sobbing openly, and even Tom was wiping his eyes. As Dr. Roberts helped Michael back into his wheelchair, Sarah knelt beside him and kissed him deeply. "You amazing, wonderful man," she whispered. "I fall in love with you more every day." The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, as if nature itself was celebrating their perfect moment. It wasn't about the steps Michael had taken. It was about the love that had made those steps possible. 1 year after their magical wedding day, Sarah and Michael sat in their new home's backyard garden. The space had been specially designed to be wheelchair-friendly, with smooth paths between the flower beds that Michael had planted himself. Sarah watched with pride as her husband showed off their tomato plants to her parents, who were visiting for Sunday dinner. "I never thought I'd see the day when Michael would become such a good gardener," Patricia said to Sarah, helping her prepare the salad in their accessible kitchen. The counters were at different heights, allowing both Sarah and Michael to cook together comfortably. Life had settled into a beautiful rhythm for the couple. Sarah still worked as a nurse at Memorial Hospital, but now she had special stories to share with her patients who felt hopeless about their disabilities. She would tell them about her husband, not just about the 3 steps he took at their wedding, but about how he lived life to the fullest every single day. Michael's software company had grown, and he now employed other people with disabilities, letting them work from home like he did. He had become an inspiration in their community, showing that success wasn't about what you couldn't do, but about what you could. Dinner's ready. Sarah called up to the garden. She smiled as she watched Michael wheel himself up the smooth ramp they had built. He still used his leg braces sometimes during his therapy sessions, but both of them knew that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the love they shared, the life they had built together. Their home had become a gathering place for friends and family. Today, besides Sarah's parents, Tom and his wife were coming over, and some of their neighbors too. People who had once been skeptical of their relationship now saw them as an example of true love. "Remember when Lisa thought we were making a mistake?" Sarah asked Michael as they set the table together. Michael laughed. "Now she asks us for relationship advice. Life has a funny way of proving people wrong." As their guests arrived, the house filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Their dining room table was big enough for everyone, with space for Michael's wheelchair to fit comfortably. They had learned that with a little creativity, every challenge had a solution. During dinner, Tom raised his glass for a toast. "To Sarah and Michael," he said, "who taught us all that love doesn't see limitations, it sees possibilities." Later that evening, after their guests had gone home, Sarah found Michael looking at their wedding album. She sat beside him, and he pulled her onto his lap in the wheelchair, something that had become their special way of cuddling. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a photo of them leaving the chapel. "Did you ever think we'd be here a year later, hosting dinner parties and growing our own vegetables?" Sarah touched the photo gently. "I always knew we'd be happy," she said. "I just didn't know how many other people we'd make happy too." It was true. Their story had spread beyond their small community. Michael had been asked to speak at support groups for people with disabilities, while Sarah had written articles about their journey for medical newsletters. Together, they had started a small foundation that helped make homes more accessible for couples like them. "We should invite Dr. Roberts for dinner next week," Michael suggested. He'd love to see the garden. Though he didn't use the leg braces often now, he still kept up with his therapy, staying strong for their future together. Sarah leaned back against his chest, feeling his strong heartbeat. "Our life may not look like other people's lives," she said softly, "but I wouldn't change it for anything." Outside, the garden they had created together bloomed under the stars. Their tomato plants were growing strong, their flowers were blossoming, and their love was deeper than ever. They had proven that true love didn't need to follow anyone else's rules. As they sat together in the quiet of their home, Sarah and Michael knew that their story wasn't just about a black woman who married a disabled man. It was about 2 people who chose to see the best in each other, who fought against prejudice and doubt, and who built a life filled with more joy and purpose than either of them had ever imagined possible. Their love had changed not only their own lives but the lives of others around them, and that, they both knew, was the greatest surprise of all.